So hi everybody, I'm Thomas Alexander. Can you hear me all right with this? Sounds perfect. So synthetic biology, I'm here to talk about a bit about what it is, why we should talk about it here at ZuVillage, and why you individually should care. Oh, come on. There you go. So, starting off strong, I think this is a question that many of you guys have asked, because I've heard it every time the conversation gets mentioned. WTF? Let's take a closer look. Before we take a closer look, let's maybe look a little closer at me and why you should even consider listening to me. So I'm a bioengineer by training. I'm not a synthetic biologist per se, but we will discuss what that means. I do have a little bit of experience in the world of synthetic biology. For example, in the last year, I've gone to basically all of the major synthetic biology events globally. So that would be Symbio Beta in San Francisco, IGEM in Paris, and also the Blockchain Meets Bio Summit at ZuVillage Montenegro. So some of you guys might have been there. Raise your hand if you were at Montenegro and attended the Symbio Summit there. So we've got a couple of people there with a little bit of background, so we'll touch on some of those topics we approached then. So, why should you trust me? Because you can see this lovely picture of me pretending to present at Symbio Beta after everybody else was done. And it's a gorgeous picture, and so obviously I look very trustworthy. I have a white coat. Studies show that people trust those in white coats implicitly. So, yeah, I heard that we were a trustless society, so I thought I'd do a little bit to bridge that gap. So here is the intro slide for the website for the Synthetic Bio Summit in Montenegro, and you see some pretty pictures of what a dream accelerated bio future could look like. It's very green, it's very solar punk, it's very AI generated in this photo, and not very detailed or based on specific things, but aspirational. And speaking of aspirational, there's a little video here which I think is interesting because I've seen it at several events. I saw it in San Francisco when they were showing off, introducing the concept of synthetic biology to people. So here are some of the interesting speakers we got to talk to. There's some very relevant people to this subfield here. We have a Drew Endy, who is credited with coming up with a lot of these concepts. Then we have the organizer of the largest event, John Cumbers, and then several CEOs that are active in this space or adjacent spaces, and we'll talk about what the difference between synthetic biology spaces and the adjacent spaces are. But let's take a look at that video, shall we? So let's ask if this is synthetic biology.
The bee is an incredible biological machine. This creature's tiny neuron computer makes trillions of calculations as it maneuvers its body with speed and precision. The bee colony is a self-maintaining, self-replicating system programmed to endlessly continue its task of survival. Through our understanding of the DNA code, we are gaining the ability to create new living machines to our design specifications. The natural world is filled with building blocks of the DNA software, which combined with engineering will open breathtaking possibilities. Fully unlocking this code will bring us the greatest technological advancement ever known to our civilization. Imagine modifying the DNA code of plants to grow living buildings. We can revolutionize construction, architecture, and gardening, creating entire cities out of living organic material. The most powerful computing system known to us is the brain. Once we become capable of programming and organizing neurons, we can create new supercomputers, dwarfing our current systems in power and efficiency. This paradigm in technology and evolution can expand life's ability to colonize and populate our solar system and beyond. Sending living spaceships and organisms modified and engineered to live in different extraterrestrial environments. This new self-aware and self-guiding evolutionary process can take life to the next level of existence.
So, I'm not in presentation mode anymore, but you guys can still see what's going on.
Escape.
I'm trying.
So just refresh, hold and tab.
Apologies for technical difficulties. So, I guess let me ask the question. Is this WTF Symbiosis? And while a lot of these topics are definitely relevant, I'm going to go with a polite hell no. Well, no? Maybe. So, these sort of Frankensteinian horrors, hopefully we don't live in a world where this is what it looks like. However, a lot of these concepts are valid and are actively being addressed by synthetic biology. So let's hit an actual definition of what synthetic biology is. So synthetic biology is the engineering of biology with the synthesis of complex biologically based or inspired systems which display functions that do not exist in nature. This engineering perspective may be applied to all levels of hierarchy of biological structures, from individual molecules to whole cells, tissues, and organisms. In essence, synthetic biology will enable the design of biological systems in a rational and systematic way. So breaking that down to the key points, it applies engineering principles to biologically based or inspired systems that have novel functions at multiple levels. So that's why this is such a broad field, where because you can have a system that operates on the level of DNA, an engineered circuit, for example, or you can have something that operates on the level of a engineered community of organisms. So it's a very broad. It can be directly an organism, or it can be something just based off of system of biological systems, and we'll learn more about what the actual mechanics and biomolecules in biology look like for those who don't have a background. So we'll have other talks on that in the future today. But a little bit of background just for the very basics. The central dogma of biology states that DNA codes for RNA, codes for proteins, which code for cells and organisms. So it starts from a basic codified DNA structure, and through computation forms everything you see that's based on biology. So the basic structure here is that life is foundationally computational. So that given that life runs on a computational structure, that means that it can be used to, we can theoretically use living systems and living base and biologically inspired systems to read and write matter. So we can take concepts from computer science and from other engineering disciplines and use them to create programmatic matter. And so that's the long-term goal of synthetic biology. And so you can see the fundamental technology that enabled us to make these connections of going from Francis Crick and James Watson discovering that DNA has a structural code that's physically encoded and readable, to being able to sequence and write DNA. So you can print DNA by order and get exactly the code that you want, that you may have discovered or edited from living organisms. Call out for the future talks on this subject. Today we actually have a demonstration of this curve here, where you can see that the price for DNA sequencing from 1990 to 2017 fell on a logarithmic scale absolutely drastically, to the point where it used to take a whole lab months to do a single sequence, and now we're going to do real sequencing on campus today from 3:30 to 6:30, and so we'll get some more background from the Luba Research Institute on that. So it's a very exciting time to see biotech tools and synthetic biology tools in practice. So this is the basic fundamental insight of synthetic biology, that life is computational and therefore can be engineered. And so we apply this metaphor here that you can see, where on the left we have the logic of computer science, where you have the physical layer, transistors, gates, capacitors, ways that we can store and track electrons. They have an analog component here, which are the genes and proteins which store information and act on it in living systems. And so you can use that and follow the abstraction all the way up from proteins and genes to biochemical reactions, which function as actual Boolean logic gates. That's another thing that synthetic biology is studying, how to use biochemical reactions to do computation in order to trigger specific events like halting aging and expanding telomeres, initiating the synthesis of a particular molecule via control of pathways, and then eventually whole cells and organisms. So this is a quick talk about the engineering logic behind what makes synthetic biology an engineering discipline. It's because it's rational. We look at the tools we have from biology or inspired biology, and we figure out what problem space we want to apply them to. So you ask questions, you imagine, you plan, you create, you improve. It's rational, it's design-based. Here is that concept of abstraction again, where you can create, you can take DNA and you can systematize it, you can abstract it into specific biological parts, and then combine those parts into devices and systems using standardized notation, and the concept of biobricks is a thing where you have a single piece of functional DNA code, and then you can combine them using separate integrative pieces of DNA that you can combine separately and then will be uptaken by organisms called plasmids. And then you can design an organism, test it, and learn if you reached your engineering design goals, and then keep doing that through the concept of iterative design. And this is the core concept of one of the main drivers of the synthetic biology field, the International Genetically Engineered Machine Competition, which is a student genetic engineering competition that is huge. Thousands of people compete every year. It costs like tens of thousands of dollars worth per project, which is very interesting for student teams. And this has been going on as a conceptual driver for synthetic biology since it was incepted in roughly 2003-2004. Here you can see this year's convention. This draws not just students, but also governments, companies, startups, lots of people who are interested in seeing how we can apply the logic of programming biology, which means programming matter, to all of these issues that we want to address here. You can see how it's grown over time. So the question we have here is, what are the common ground with the themes of ZuVillage? What does synthetic biology have to do with network states, with DSci, longevity, space tech, rationality? In addition to the underlying logic that I've mentioned here about engineering biology being engineering matter, they are all mostly BS. Bold solutions. All of these topics are wildly aspirational, incredibly interdisciplinary, and diverse and incredibly future-focused. All of us here are creating moonshots. We are we are daring to think in terms of things that most people would think are BS, but we know are BS. So to get a concept of why you might be questioning, well, these things are really diverse concepts which have, like I say, interdisciplinary. All of these things are based off of a huge number of highly specific subfields. So longevity isn't a thing that stands alone. Longevity is built on molecular biology, medicine, pharmaceuticals, like biohacking, human nutrition, all of these things. And just like longevity, space, any of these aspirational, future-focused goals where we're designing to come together and take wild shots, they're based off of a wider range of established and very detailed technical fields. Synthetic biology, I would argue, is not just one thing. It's very difficult to put a label on what is and what isn't synthetic biology, because even the definition of engineering biology, if you look around, if you're from the UK, for example, you'll know that engineering biology is actually an entirely different field they use there. Bioengineering is a separate field. Biotech, molecular biology. There's 1,000,001 technical subfields and fields of bioethics, and all of these things that come together to form a nexus point that allow dreamers and allow people who want to make BS reality. Both solutions. Again, it's very specific. So what can we apply it to? As you can see in this graphic, we can apply synthetic biology and engineering principles to biomaterials, biofuels, novel biomedicine that can be triggered, which can have diagnostics or therapeutics that are triggered by underlying chemical logic that can be actively sensed in your cells or in the environment to degrade a pollutant, or to do bioremediation, or to produce food ingredients, bulk chemicals or fine chemicals, using the logic of biological computation. So here you can see some of the examples. This is just, I drew this from the iGEM competition. These are all of the different subfields that people are applying synthetic biology to in this particular niche. You can see agriculture, biomanufacturing, bioremediation, a million things, therapeutics, and this one here, that's space. So there you go. And so it's not only a student field, it's not only a dream. There are actual companies in this space that are currently solving major world problems. So I have a couple of examples here. These are non-exhaustive. If you guys have questions about how you could apply biotech or synthetic biology to your research interests, come talk to me. I'm sure we can find some interesting rabbit holes for you guys to dive down. But let's touch on a couple here. Specifically, the first example here is Pivot Bio. Pivot Bio is attempting to solve the nitrogen fixation problem. So this is the core problem with our industrial food system, is that plants need nitrogen to grow, but the nitrogen in the atmosphere is not accessible to plants. All the nitrogen in our bodies gets into us from plants. It's an incredibly important biological molecule, but it needs to be either produced chemically in a process called that was invented in World War II in order to make explosives, because nitrogen is also a key component of nitrocellulose, nitroglycerin. But this is incredibly carbon intensive, and so the basis of our agricultural system is to produce a huge amount of carbon, while Pivot Bio steps in and says, we can engineer a biological microbe that we can spray on the field to make it so that the crops can fix their own nitrogen. So this is a scaled solution. It's already offsetting a huge amount of nitrogen needs, and preventing a huge amount of fertilizer waste. Also, it produces only as much as, say, symbiosis. It doesn't produce a huge excess, which doesn't lead to runoff of ammonia fertilizer into waterways, which cause algal blooms and therefore like major fish die-offs. Another company would be LanzaJet and LanzaTech. We don't necessarily have giant flying wasp helicopters, but we do have the ability to make aviation sustainable by capturing greenhouse gases directly at the source, and then using engineered microbes to directly capture that CO2 and turn it into alcohol, which allows us to be the basis for all plastic-based chemicals that we currently use, and in addition to sustainable aviation fuels. Which I'm sure a lot of you, this is relevant to all of you because the majority of you flew here. I don't think many of you swam. And then, finally, we might not be able to grow a living skyscraper from a seed, but we can grow living materials. And this is an example from Biomason, which engineers living concrete, and Biocement, which is another example of how synthetic biology is allowing us to change the foundations of our industrial economy to offset another incredibly carbon-intensive process, which is cement making, which accounts for 8% of total carbon emissions. It's one of the largest sectors. Whereas the living biocement, the microbes there they mineralize calcium, the carbon, and with calcium that they secrete into a carbon sequestering concrete that allows our buildings to, instead of producing concrete, to absorb it over time. So these are just some examples of where synthetic biology is now, what the logic is, and how it can go forward into the future. I hope that you guys aren't too mad at me for saying everybody here are dreamers. And I want to just say that the future for using the building blocks of life to inspire new chemistry is limitless. Nature is the best engineer, and we are finally getting to play with her tools and make it do whatever we can dream of. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you guys so much. After this, we're going to have some talks about how synthetic biology intersects with computation in the more traditional sense, and how we know some of the things that we know about how biology functions. So, where is Christian? Do you want to
take any questions?
Oh yes, that's a great point. What time is it, by the way?
It's 5 to 12.
5 to 12. So 5-10 minutes of questions. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so whilst our body's machinery is mostly effective,
Yes.
there's certainly errors which occur
Yes.
physiologically in the bodies of us. How does synthetic biology address these issues?
So synthetic biology addresses the issues of how the natural flaws in our biology. I hope that nobody is offended by this belief, but I do not believe we were rationally designed, but we could be. Synthetic biology builds off of decades, centuries of health and bio research, and allows us to once we understand these systems through sequencing through various analytical methods and then simulation, which we'll talk about soon, we can then make rational decisions using the whole suite of biology. We only have one evolutionary lineage that created us, but using synthetic biology, we can take biology from any source and adapt it for our own purposes. Or we can take the tools of biology, and we can think about them as material scientists. We can use them in ways that they never would have evolved to do in reality, in nature, such as taking DNA and looking at DNA not as a coding system, but as a nanostructure that is programmable, which is being used to build the structure for nanobots, for nanomachines, for localization of specific drugs. There's a huge array of how we can take the logic of biology at a fundamental level and apply it using engineering principles and using human ingenuity. So the sky's the limit.
Let's assume that someone came with an idea to make a virus that produces LSD in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And that virus becomes super widespread. So what your ideas, how it could be prevented? Because in principle, you know, by making that, okay, let's use one example, but we can even think that will actually capture human minds, like, you know, small microbes that would significantly alter our behavior. So what your ideas in terms of when it will happen and how humanity would protect from that threat?
So that was a question about biosecurity and
biosecurity.
Yes. So that was a question about biosecurity and how can we prevent against engineered threats. That's a big question. It's not. We had some people who specifically that was their research focus. And so I focused mainly on engineered microbes. You might have noticed all of my examples were in that space. However, we have existing public health systems, like we'll learn about today from the Lugar Institute, that allow us to control and control for biological agents. There are questions about controlling what can be synthesized by a printer, but that doesn't necessarily control everything. The majority, there's a huge technical hurdle. I don't know if the chemistry is even possible to synthesize LSD in your existing cells.
Then why we need synthetic biology at all?
I mean, you can make LSD. You just do chemistry. Like, I'm sure somebody here knows how to get onto the dark web and can help you out. There was another question? Okay.
I have one. What does it look like right now, like a typical day of a synthetic biologist? Is it mostly spent on simulators, or still simulating like chemical reaction is more expensive than doing like experiments in the labs?
Okay, so this is going to be another one of my spicy takes. I don't know if there is a typical day for a synthetic biologist, because I don't think there is a typical synthetic biologist. I think that synthetic biology, as I said before, it's a nexus point between a wide array of subfields. So there are a lot of people who would consider themselves synthetic biologists that have vastly different skill sets. And there are traditional things that are considered synthetic biology, but there are also a lot of things that exist in that space that would not be wouldn't follow the standardization principle where you start with biobricks and you combine them together. There's a lot of other things. So the typical day for, let's say, the typical synthetic biologist they'd primarily be probably a molecular biologist or a geneticist. And they would do simulations on software or on paper. They would study the metabolic network of a cell and look at how they could adapt it to produce a new molecule, or they would look at the biochemistry or the biophysics of a protein or a ribosome or a cell simulation. And then they would use that to make a particular directed approach. So that would look different as the project progressed. So starting with literature review, moving on to simulations to create a hypothesis, then you create testable experiments, you do testable experiments, and you produce your organism or your molecule, and then you validate it, and then you go back and you can redo the engineering design cycle.
Okay, so computers are really powerful enough to simulate the experiment.
That's going to be answered in the next talk. Any other question?
So out of this 3 examples, maybe you have another example
Sure.
about like one was nitrogen replacement with nitrogen fertilizer. This one is concrete. So any of these technologies are actually economically viable for next 3-5 years.
All 3 of these examples I gave are economically viable. They're making money. They're solving problems right now. That's why I chose them. These are
I mean, they actually like commercial projects.
Yeah, they're commercial products. Pivot, their proven fertilizer is taking over large portions of the agricultural
Would it be cheaper
market.
just to deploy this instead of buying nitrogen fertilizers?
It's been the traditional chemical fertilizers. I don't know the economics personally. It's going to be different for every farmer, but I do know that their market share is increasing quite quickly. Not all synthetic biology companies are profitable, but a lot of the ones that aren't profitable don't have proven products yet. And I chose these 3 specifically because they are currently disrupting markets. So there are others that are very, very early stage, some that are pure science, some like a telomere extending or biological clock tracking with sensors, or production of pharmaceuticals in space, production of materials in space. All of those are still very nascent industries, and they still have a huge amount of room to grow. The field is about 20 years old, which sounds like a long time, but when your goal is to turn biology into not one, but a whole suite of engineering paradigms, that's not a whole lot of time.
When token?
Huh? When token? By grow.
There is one. The funny question, just to bring the topic of like, okay, interesting spot looking at the applications in concrete board. When does this plug in like the whole view of futuristic meta states of networks or crypto or whatever it is that we connect around that? Like,
Well, so first of all, you asked about tokens. I am not incredibly affiliated, but I am affiliated with the only existing synthetic biology DAO that I know of, Valley DAO, which is a climate synthetic biology focused DAO. They're a research DAO that is planning on taking fundamental research that's almost at commercial stage, that is similar to these examples here, and turning them into products, and then doing revenue sharing to further invest in climate-focused synbio. So that's an example of how you can use DeSci principles and tokens to create community ownership of these transformative technologies. If we're aiming to fundamentally restructure our economy, this is a great place to talk about how we can structure it in a way that the average person benefits more than Jeff Bezos. It wouldn't be great if we realized, hey, we can use AI to do all of these, or AI and synthetic biology to disrupt every industry, and it's all owned by Amazon and Alphabet and all the people who currently exist. So this is a huge example to not only disrupt the petrochemical logic of our world, but also to disrupt it in a way that we, as a community, not just us in this room, but as a broader global community, have access to it and benefit from it. Another thing you could address that to would be longevity. Longevity, for example, you guys are talking about, at Vitalia, for example, about all of how you're going to produce these longevity molecules without any sort of pharma oversight, and then you're going to extend your lifespans on your little island in Honduras without the scalability and the logic of synthetic biology, biotechnology, biochemistry. There's no way that you can produce that without the complex supply chains and existing regulatory infrastructure, which I do believe we need supply chains and regulatory infrastructure for this, but biology is local. All atoms are local. That is the thesis of Durendi, if you guys met him last time. Is that biology, if you want to make a plant, you don't have to have a supply chain, you just have to have a seed, sunlight, water, and the atmosphere. So that's why biology is different from current industry and why it's relevant to all these fields.
So to buy $5 petrodollar at once, we buy grow. That's the idea.
I mean, this is not financial advice, but if you want, or start your own. There's only one synthetic biology DAO, so maybe Vita is gonna invest in synthetic biology labs to produce their chemicals. So yeah. But decentralization is how biology is decentralized. So is all of the technology we're talking about here today. Any other questions before I hand it off? Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you so much.